A very warm welcome, Carole and Claire. Thank you so much for joining in for this campaign of ours on World Day of Social Justice. We have been following your non-profit's work, and we eagerly wanted to connect with you to understand more about this issue that we are facing here. So thank you so much for joining in, and for everyone who's watching, I would like to introduce Carole. So we have Carole Day with us. She is the CEO of a non-profit called Afrika Tikkun, which is a non-profit which serves to the underserved community, and they help the young people empower from. So they have this title and this motto called Cradles to career, if I'm not wrong, Carole.
Right. Yes.
So I think that's their motto, and they empower the youth with in multiple ways, and we will try to understand from Carole and Claire itself that how Afrika Tikkun is trying to create an impact. So first of all, Carole, I'd like to start this conversation with the most basic question. So currently we are talking on the topic of social justice, which is quite a novel term when we talk about certain causes. So first of all, I'd like to understand from you that what is social justice and why is this concept the need of the hour?
Pratham, thanks so much for having us. So from a social justice in terms of the concept and how it's relevant to us at Afrika Tikkun and in the context in which we operate, or the environment in which we operate, I'm sure you're aware of the historical side of South Africa and what the country's been through, and apartheid and the legacy of apartheid and what that's left in terms of impact in South Africa. The disparity between people in South Africa is absolutely enormous. And that, really speaks to the social injustice of apartheid, the legacy of that, but also the current climate in which we find ourselves operating. So from a Afrika Tikkun perspective, the cradle to career model that you spoke about looks at addressing social injustice and providing opportunities to empower the young people. So as you mentioned, we have Cradle to Career, which is children from the ages of 2 all the way through to adults of 35. The term youth in South Africa is anybody under the age of 35. So that's the reason the model looks at that whole age group. And in terms of the social justice that we're looking at addressing, or the injustice that we're looking at addressing, we're looking at an opportunity to create a platform or diversification in terms of economic, political, social opportunities that all lead to a more equal footing for our youth, and trying to address some of the SDGs at the same time in terms of sort of poverty and we'll go through those in a bit, but there's a lot of SDGs which are touch points that address the social injustices that we're looking to address. So the point of Afrika Tikkun is to allow the youth to become economically independent, to become educated, and to help them feel empowered around social, human, gender, whatever issues and rights they're all facing, so that we can create a more level playing field and address social justice or injustice. Claire, I don't know if you have any additional items you would like to talk about under that topic.
Thanks, Carole, and thanks, Pratham, for having us. I think your question kind of speaks to why is social justice the need of the hour, and just to speak to that point, I think it's really reaffirming that the kind of global world is having an awakening around social justice issues, and there really is this kind of shift towards more empathetic thinking, as we were discussing before the call started, we've seen there's been a growth in giving from younger generations, from millennials and younger even now, and it's really promising to see that there's this kind of growth of social consciousness at a larger scale. And yeah, I mean, for us, the inequalities and the social injustices that our mission at Afrika Tikkun is addressing are not new issues. They're issues that have been here for many, many, many years. And, you know, we're 30 years on from apartheid almost, and are struggling to see real structural changes in our country. But social justice as the need of the hour is really, it's promising to see that, you know, these issues are becoming part of the kind of social consciousness.
Thank you so much, Claire, and thank you so much, Carole. I think you both of you very well captured the entire essence of social justice, I'd say, taking in account the different aspects that social justice has. I am even more intrigued about knowing more about your organization as well. So now I'd like you to throw some light on how Afrika Tikkun plays a role in this entire landscape of social justice and social injustice that is prevalent in our society, and how does it address these issues, and how does it actually creates an impact in the community?
So Pratham, as we mentioned earlier, the model that we operate is the cradle to career model. So within that model, we have separate entities. One of the overriding factor of all is education of youth. So we have 5 centers throughout South Africa, and we operate an outreach movement as well within South Africa. So meaning, even though we don't have a specific center-based environment, we still work within communities that extend beyond those physical structures. And within those centers, we address topics around early education, around food security and nutrition, around gender equality and social changes and empowerment, jobs, education. Well, education is the basis of all, good health, etc. So we make sure that we have all those aspects covered. So the entire model, all 5 centers, operates independently. We have early childhood development, child and youth development, career development, youth empowerment programs. And we also then have separate empowerment programs that are peer-led programs. So for example, we're trying to change the narrative around gender-based violence, etc. So instead of speaking to young women and telling them how they should behave, we're trying to change the narrative by educating young men and addressing those traditional thought processes and having peer-led discussions around what they should perhaps do to tackle the problem. We have a huge problem of gender-based violence in South Africa, as I'm sure you're aware. So it's changing those narratives and making sure that we are working to address those controversial topics, and making sure that we're listening to the young people and addressing the areas that they feel that, you know, might need challenging or changing of opinion. And we're also trying to make sure that we are way more inclusive in terms of our messaging, both internally and externally, and in terms of the campaigns that we set, make sure that they're relevant and inclusive. So our entire model centers around social justice, really. If we look at our cradle to career model, it's addressing the SDGs of there are very few that we don't address in terms of our day-to-day offerings within the centers. But the overall outcome that we're looking for is to eradicate poverty as much as we can, or at least change the opportunities of our young people in terms of their futures, and to make sure that the balance of social justice is completely different going forward. We want to make sure that the wider communities are informed about what we're doing, the way that we operate, take on board other perspectives, incorporate them into the offerings that we have, and make sure that we as Afrika Tikkun are listening to what our youngsters say as well, so that we're addressing what we think is normal may not be normal anymore, that we're taking that on board and we are changing the way we speak and making sure that we are inclusive across all dynamics, regardless of what sort of social justice or injustice we're looking at. Afrika Tikkun has been operational for going on 28 years. So social justice is not a new concept. As Claire says, we're heading towards 30 years in terms of coming out of apartheid, but the balance has not shifted, not even closely to what it should be in terms of social justice. We have a 60% unemployment rate amongst the youth of South Africa. Until we address those issues and we find a balance, this is an ongoing issue. It's good that we're talking about it now. We just need to be very much more specific about working with companies, working with corporates, working with governments to make sure that it's not a once-off conversation. It's an entire change of thinking and structure that we need to incorporate into our daily thinking.
Thank you, Carole. I think I'm glad that you shared that social justice is not something like a novel concept, and it has been there since quite a long time now. But here I'd like to mention that the awareness about this concept is pretty low. Like I would say that social justice includes a lot of small issues, small and large issues, that constitutes the entire concept of social justice and social injustice. So and as I said, the awareness about this umbrella term called social justice is quite low, is fairly low amongst the people. So are there some things about this particular concept that you would like more and more people to know about?
Yeah, I mean, I think from our perspective, addressing these issues around social justice, as you said, there are many aspects to social justice and social injustice. And, with Afrika Tikkun, the approach is, as Carole has mentioned, and she's kind of gone through quite extensively the different topics that we address, but the approach is really looking at a holistic model for addressing these issues, a holistic model towards development, and with the outcome of empowering youth from the very beginning, because recognizing that structure starts from a very, very early age, and by empowering our youngest group of children, which we start from 2-3 years old in our ECD centers, we recognize that by empowering youth from as young as 2 all the way through to their adulthood is necessary, because of the structural injustices that are inherited and that are in place in so many of the communities in South Africa. I'm not sure if that answers the question, but I think it's just really about recognizing that social justice isn't one unique issue that can be solved. It's a bundle of issues that are affected by all sorts of things in a society, in any given society, but also to recognize that social injustice, when we look at it closely, there are very clear class and racial divides that we can see. And so often when we talk about social justice issues, it is talking about racial issues and class issues, and then you have to kind of think in economic terms and racial terms, and how do we come to deal with these kind of issues that are really entrenched in so many of our society, in the global society. It's an incredibly difficult issue to unpack, but I think just to reiterate that Afrika Tikkun's approach is to think about these issues holistically, and to think how can, you know, we provide the best outcomes for the people that we serve, as they kind of leave our care into the world and become self-sufficient adults, and you know, are we empowering them to reach a more sustainable livelihood and achieve kind of a more equal footing in society.
Thank you so much, Claire, for sharing all those things. I think you very rightly captured the essence of the entire concept of social justice, because like you said, that it's not one issue. It's a constitution of a lot of small and large issues. And since it is a constitution of it comprises of different issues, which creates an umbrella concept of social justice, it cannot be addressed solely. We need to address the individual issues, individual underlying issues under social injustice that we are facing, that different societies are facing across the world, and then only we'll be able to address this particular issue of social injustice. So thank you so much for bringing that up. And here I would like to switch on to one particular aspect of the social injustice that I think Carole also mentioned that Afrika Tikkun has been working upon, is poverty eradication. Right. So I want to understand that how does social injustice contribute to this poverty alleviation, and how can we address that?
So I think reducing poverty is the basis for providing a platform for social justice. I think if, you know, we are looking at providing greater and more equal education opportunities, that's going to be a key and overriding factor in reducing poverty and helping to balance the social justice or injustices of our time. I think if we look at the implementation of programs that offer the same opportunities to perhaps the disadvantaged communities, as well as what we currently offer to our more affluent communities, we will get to the point where the playing field is leveled, you know, better than it has been. And I think for Afrika Tikkun specifically, or speaking from our perspective, the reason we have a cradle to career model is so that we can educate and train our young people to become independent, become economically empowered, become aware of the opportunities that are available to them, to the young people, but to go hand in hand with that, to also educate our youngsters around empowerment, around addressing gender based items that are inadequate or unbalanced at the moment, around nutrition, around food security, around career development, etc., so that we can make sure that we are leveling the playing field as very much, or in the best possible way that we can. And the only real way Afrika Tikkun can make that impact is through education, which is really why we focus our core programs around that. And then we have our supporting programs, which include food and nutrition security, which include empowerment programs, include family support services, looking at how we can support the greater family, not just the youngsters who come to our centers, but where we see there's a greater need for support, we will address that through our social services, our social workers, through any means that we need to help those families feel supported and ensure that they are able to function. And then further to that, I think we spoke earlier about our model not being specifically available only within our centers. Where we look at moving out into bigger areas, our sphere of influence becomes bigger and more impactful. We can look at how we can sustain these models in other areas without having to create a huge infrastructure around it, but work within those programs that are already going on in those areas, but where they may need some more backup or may need some additional support. We can pick and choose from our model as to what they would require of us, and help them package that into something that gives them better opportunity in the areas that they struggle with. And we're also looking at sustainability in terms of the environment, in terms of recycling, in terms of waste. And we're talking about that to our youngsters all the time. So from an environmental perspective, the areas in which we are working are not affluent areas. So, recycling is maybe way down on the list of things to attend to when it's more about survival. But it doesn't mean it's not important to discuss. So it's imparting that knowledge, it's listening to those conversations and making sure that they're taking place in the best way possible, whilst at the same time realizing that there are so many pressing issues. We need to listen to what it is our youngsters are looking for from us, so that we can make sure that they're getting the right feedback and help from us to enable the social injustices to eventually be eradicated, and poverty is one of those main items. That was a really long way of answering that question.
Not at all. I think the way you are answering all my questions, I think I can sit here for hours and listen to you, because these are some things that I have been listening to from a lot of nonprofits, and it in every single interview it personally enriches me as well about what are the issues and how possibly different nonprofit organizations are addressing those issues and creating an impact. So I think I really like one thing, that you're not just addressing to this issue of poverty, you are addressing this issue from multiple aspects, like from education and like finding out the root causes, right? Finding out the root causes and addressing them, so that it does not provide just a temporary solution to what the society is facing. It gives a platform how society itself, people themselves can uplift their existence and overcome all these challenges that they're facing currently. So I think that's commendable. And so going ahead, I'd like to discuss more about a different aspect of non-profit organizations in general. So whenever I have gotten into conversations with non-profit organizations, so they have unanimously said one thing about this, that when it comes to the biggest stakeholders in a non-profit organization, it has to be its volunteers. Not the leadership team, not the founders, not the beneficiaries, but the volunteers. Why? Because no one alone can drive the cause and take it to the next level all alone. It needs a group of people who have the right intent at their heart to support the cause, to come up and support a platform like a non-profit like yours and take the cause ahead. So I would like to understand from you as well, how does Afrika Tikkun interacts with its volunteers? What are the various ways that volunteers can contribute? Someone, let's say, like me, who's sitting in completely different part of the world, but has the right intent and eagerly wants to support your cause. How can someone like me come up and contribute in terms of time, effort, however they can?
Pratham, I agree and I disagree with regards to the volunteers. I think volunteers are incredibly important, absolutely. And in the manner that you're speaking about it, in terms of if it was you, what could you do remotely to work with us? But I think it's also very important from a social justice perspective to realize that to make sure that an organization like Afrika Tikkun is successful, we must make sure that education and employment are key. So we as Afrika Tikkun are one of the biggest employers within the communities in which we operate. So it may be that people start with volunteering through us, or become educated or extra educated through us and learn new training and skills and development, etc. But I think it's very important that organizations like Afrika Tikkun are actually able to employ people to make sure that it is a sustainable model, because volunteers are incredibly important. I'm not undermining that at all, but it's also incredibly important from a sustainability perspective that we have human capital within an organization to ensure that the longevity of an organization is doable. From a volunteering perspective, we discussed earlier how small the world has gotten with digital, etc. And one of the things that we have implemented over the last couple of years, for obvious reasons, is a digital platform. So we're working with an in-house digital platform for our students, which allow them access to our programs remotely. So should they not be able to come to the centers, or should we be in another lockdown, etc., we have that access available to our youngsters. And then more than that, in terms of a volunteering perspective, we have implemented quite a few programs which have virtual mentoring or volunteering aspects to it, which has been incredible. So for example, we have a technology and transformation program which we have trialed over the last year. It's involved mentors from a global perspective. So they're based in every continent pretty much. They belong to a specific corporate that we work with. And they have been mentors to our young people who have registered for that particular IT training program. So the training program was an accredited program that the youngsters went through, and they've literally just graduated last week. And as part of that program, there was this mentorship angle. So they got to meet one-on-one with mentor-mentee. They went through any issues that they were facing in terms of maybe not understanding part of what they were learning, and getting some input from somebody on the ground in the field of IT who could give them some further insight or input. Or they literally just exchange ideas, or they get to know one another and talk about personal lives, how things are in their different hemispheres or worlds or communities. So the level of volunteering is completely different. We have another group of people in the Netherlands who read stories to our little ones, the 2 to 6 year olds. They have a book, and then our youngsters, those that are old enough to know how to read, also read back to them and ask questions. So the interaction is just incredible, and the opportunity for volunteering now is completely different from what it has been in the past. And then not to forget the face-to-face interactions, which are never to be underrated. I mean, for a youngster to know that there's somebody that has an interest in their lives and their worlds, and making it better in any way, shape or form they can by spending time doing things with them, I mean, it can change the course of someone's life, really. That's
so true, Carole. I think every single word that you've shared, I think I totally agree with all the things. And yeah, so I think those were all my questions. And thank you so much for so wholesomely answering each one of them. And it was really very insightful, and I hope that it is equally insightful for all our viewers as well, who will be watching this, and they get to know about Afrika Tikkun more through this interview. And like they come up. I hope that more and more volunteers and donors come up for your organization as well.
Brilliant. Oh, thank you so much for having us, Pratham. As I said, I do talk a lot, so I'm sorry if I've spent most of the time talking. Sorry, Claire. But it was really nice to think about this aspect of the work we do, and spend some time getting our heads around what it is we do towards facing social justice or injustice in the world. So thank you for the opportunity.